The universe doesn't pick the loudest, only the realist. And once it picks you, you become the mirror that shatters every fake around you. Welcome back, chosen ones. Let's be real. They were never ready for the quiet storm you've become. They thought you'd break, cry, beg, fold. But instead, you got silent, strong, calculated. They weren't fighting you. They were wrestling with the force that chose you. And trust this, they lost. They didn't expect your silence to be that loud. They didn't expect your glow-up to blind them. And now, they're spiraling, like snakes shedding skin in the dark, uncomfortable in the light you've become. You were once their puppet, but now you pull your own strings, and that power, that haunts them. If you're feeling this, hit that like and subscribe, not for clout, but because when you engage, you're helping this message travel. Every click tells the algorithm there's more chosen ones out there who need this truth. You're not just watching, you're part of the signal. Let's talk about what really scares them. The power of being chosen. It isn't about ego or status. It's about alignment. The universe doesn't hand this role to just anyone. It watches, it waits. And when it finds a soul built for pressure, forged in pain and steady in storms, it marks you, quietly, powerfully. And once you're marked, there's no going back. You see, when the universe picks you, you're no longer walking through life. You're being carried by purpose. And that kind of movement, it looks like magic to the untrained eye. That's why they stare. That's why they talk. They don't understand how you're still standing, still thriving, still calm, when they threw chaos at you like knives. But here's the part they'll never say out loud. They crave you. Your energy, your peace, your growth. It's addictive. You've become a detox they can't survive, and a high they can't recreate. You're not just a chapter. They keep rereading your story because their life never got better after you. They thought you were just a phase, but you're the glitch in their system. You're the silence that exposes their noise. You're the one who showed them what power looks like when it's dressed in restraint, not rage. And you, chosen one, need to remember this. Stop doubting your light. Every time you question your worth, you're playing into their hands. They want you to feel alone, forgotten, like the universe made a mistake, picking you. But it didn't. You're not here by accident. You're here because they couldn't be. Because they didn't make it through the fires you did. So don't apologize for evolving. Don't explain your peace. Don't water down your energy to make them comfortable. You owe no one an easy version of yourself. You are the storm that chose stillness, the fire that chose focus. And that kind of self-control, it's scarier than rage. Stay solid. Stay unbothered. And remember, they didn't lose you. You outgrew them. So, if this message is already stirring something deep in you, good. That means you're not just watching, you're remembering who you are. Drop the number 77 in the comments if you've ever been underestimated, pushed aside, or told you were too different, only to rise in silence and shake their world. Your maturity didn't make you weak. It made you unforgettable. And now, they can't stop watching. They can't stop craving. They can't stop freaking out. And now, let's go deeper. If you're truly one of the chosen, you'll feel it in your bones. Stay with me, because the real hit is just beginning. Let's get into it. Number 1. They tried to play you, but ended up playing themselves. The cruelest punishment for those who tried to break you is watching you rise untouched, unbothered, and unreachable. Chosen ones, let's get something straight right now. They didn't lose sleep because you yelled back. They lost sleep because you didn't. They lost the game the moment you refused to pick up the sword they laid at your feet. They expected drama and chaos. They needed it, fed off it like parasites. But instead of losing your mind, you mastered it. And now they're stuck in a boxing ring, swinging at shadows of the person they thought you were. You became the mirror they couldn't escape. Not because you threw their darkness back at them, but because you held up the truth so clearly they had nowhere to hide. You didn't scream, you didn't argue, you didn't explain. And somehow, that silence echoed louder than anything they've ever heard. That's the kind of haunting maturity they never trained for. That's why they're freaking out. That's why you're now living rent-free in the space between their regret and obsession. Let me say this loud and clear. When the universe chooses you, it doesn't send flowers, it sends fire. And if you're still here, it means you survived it. You didn't just survive them, you survived what they activated inside you. That inner war, that internal chaos. You won that too. And now the energy that once broke you is the same energy you're commanding, like it answers to your name. They were never fighting you. They were wrestling the system that chose you. The system they thought they could cheat. The very force of nature that wrapped you in storms just to make sure you could still stand after lightning hit. They were punching at fate, taunting purpose, and mocking the process. And now they're paying the price in sleepless nights, confused hearts, and shattered egos. You want to know why they keep watching you, why they can't look away? Because you're the what if they can't stop asking. What if they hadn't messed up? What if they had matched your growth? What if they had respected your light instead of trying to dim it? You're not just a memory, you're a lesson carved into their timeline, and it hurts every time they remember they were the villain in your origin story. And you, chosen one, need to stop doubting your light. How dare you question the gift that let you walk through their storms and come out dry? How dare you feel too much or too different when the very energy you carry bends reality around it? You're not misunderstood. You're just ahead of your time. You're not alone. You're just operating at a frequency they can't survive. Remember this. They wanted you reactive because it gave them control. They wanted you broken because your wholeness scared them. They wanted your energy because they couldn't create their own. And when you didn't play along, when you stood still like a storm with eyes wide open, they lost all power over you. That moment, that's when the addiction began. They don't miss you. They miss the power they had when you didn't know yours. You were never supposed to argue with fools. You were meant to rise so far above their level that they'd have to look up just to disrespect you. And now, every time they try to recreate the game they played with you, it fails. Because no one matches your energy. No one holds silence the way you did. No one carries pain with the same elegance. You were the blueprint, and now they're stuck with knockoffs that don't even come close. Let this fuel you. Let their confusion, their regret, their obsession be the gasoline to your flame. The universe didn't choose you for a soft life. It chose you for a strong one. And every time you doubt yourself, you dull a weapon the universe personally sharpened. Stand tall, chosen one. You're not just the lesson. They failed. You're the test they'll never pass again. Number 2. Emotional mastery. The silent blade they never saw coming. They wanted a reaction. What they got was revelation, and that broke them more than rage ever could. Let's not sugarcoat it. They came for war, and you brought silence. Not because you had nothing to say, but because you knew your silence would say more. And it did. They showed up with matches, gasoline, and a desperate need to watch you burn. But what happened instead? You didn't even flinch. You looked them dead in the eye and let them burn themselves out, trying to light a fire you already turned to ash. You were supposed to snap. You were supposed to fall apart, scream, cry, beg, explain. That was the script they wrote for you in their mind. But you shredded that script, rewrote the scene, and walked off the stage while they were still acting. You didn't explode, you evolved, and nothing rattles the broken more than someone they couldn't break. This is what they didn't expect. Emotional intelligence, the ability to see without reacting, to know without needing to prove, to feel everything and still choose peace. That's a kind of power most people will never taste in their lives. And when they meet it in you, it terrifies them. Because people like them thrive in emotional chaos. They depend on your reaction to validate their manipulation. And when you denied them that fuel, they short-circuited. You watched them flip the board when they realized they couldn't win. And the wild part, you were never even playing. You had already mastered the game they didn't know they were in. They were throwing tantrums while you were moving pieces with purpose. They were busy trying to trigger you while you were mastering your own nervous system. They were speaking from pain, and you were answering with presence. That's why they're haunted now. They don't know what to do with someone who doesn't need to be loud to be powerful, who doesn't need to be angry to be dangerous, who doesn't need to destroy others just to win. You didn't need revenge. You were the consequence. They tried to stir your emotions because they thought that's where your power lived. But the truth is, your power was in your control, in your restraint, in the pause between what they did and how you chose to respond. You didn't just outgrow their games, you rendered them irrelevant. This level of emotional intelligence isn't just a nice trait. It's a weapon, a sharp, clean, precise weapon that cuts through manipulation like glass through paper. It's the ability to hear the insult but not drink the poison, to feel the energy shift and not absorb it, to recognize the attack and walk away undefeated. That's not weakness, that's mastery. And they will never admit it, but they know it now. Every time they think back to that moment you didn't take their bait, they remember that you were never the fragile one. They were. You want to know what scares people like that? Someone who knows how to protect their peace without losing their soul. Someone who can feel betrayal and still respond with grace. Someone who doesn't beg for closure, but becomes it. You didn't match their chaos. You became the calm that made their chaos look childish. That's why they keep spinning. That's why they're still looking for ways to pull you back in. Because being in your presence meant being seen. And for people built on lies, being seen is the worst kind of pain. Let me make this clear. Emotional intelligence is not weakness. It's warfare. It's strategic, intentional, and brutally effective. And it comes with receipts. When you walked away with your head high and your peace intact, they had to sit alone with everything they projected on you. That reflection, that silence, that mirror, it did what no scream ever could. It made them face themselves. And let's not forget this either. You didn't always have this control. You earned it. You built it through pain, trial, failure, disappointment. You trained for this moment in the fires they tried to burn you with. So, when it came time to use it, it wasn't even hard. It was natural. You became the quiet storm, the eye of the hurricane, and they stood no chance. Chosen one, stop doubting the power you carry. Stop wondering if silence was the right move. Stop questioning your strength just because it didn't look loud or messy. You were chosen for this level of growth. You were chosen because you could walk away without burning the bridge. Because you are the bridge, the connection to something higher, the proof that maturity, real maturity, doesn't scream. It stands. The universe aligned to protect you, not because you were weak, but because your energy was too important to waste. The universe shielded you from their chaos because you were destined to create clarity. You are not here to argue with fools. You are here to outlast them. So if you're still sitting there wondering why they're obsessed, why they can't let it go, why they keep circling back like moths to the flame, here's the truth. You didn't just win the game. You became the game. You became the lesson, the one they'll keep repeating until they learn to meet peace with peace. They didn't expect you to be the calm after their storm. They expected you to drown in it. And now, you're the ocean and they're stuck on the shore, watching waves they'll never be able to ride. Stand firm. You're not just emotionally intelligent, you're emotionally untouchable. And they felt that every single time. So next time someone tries to pull you into a storm, remind yourself, you are not lightning. You are the sky that holds it. Number 3, you cut deep without lifting a finger. Real power isn't in how loud you clap back. It's in how quiet you let someone collapse under the weight of their own chaos. They came looking for a street fight, expecting fireworks and retaliation. They were ready for war, armored in ego, laced with manipulation, and full of drama. But you didn't show up with fists. You showed up with precision, not to fight, to operate. They expected rage, and instead, they got soul surgery. No screaming, no shouting, no petty moves, just clean, calculated cuts straight to the core of what they were hiding behind. And here's what shattered them. You didn't even lift a blade. You let your silence do the slicing. You let your boundaries build walls they couldn't scale. You let your absence become the echo chamber where all their ugliness bounced back at them, louder than ever. That wasn't ignorance. That was intelligence. That wasn't weakness. That was warfare with finesse. You weren't avoiding the battle. You ended it before they could even draw their weapon. You weren't ignoring them. You were letting their dysfunction unravel in front of itself, raw and unmasked. You gave them the rope. You stepped back, and they hung their own illusions. Because that's the truth. The kind of person who needs a reaction to feel powerful is already losing, and you showed them exactly that. You didn't just refuse to participate in their circus. You turned the tent lights off. You made the crowd leave, and now they're screaming into an empty arena, confused why no one's clapping for their meltdown. Chosen one, your decision to disengage wasn't passive, it was surgical. Every boundary you set wasn't just a line in the sand. It was a scalpel. It cut through the fake stories, the gaslighting, the manipulative patterns they wrapped themselves in. And it exposed the truth so clearly they had no choice but to face it. Alone, naked, unarmed. That's the kind of pain that doesn't just sting, it lingers. Because when someone thrives off chaos, peace feels like punishment. And you gave them the coldest punishment of all, accountability. You made them sit in a room with the one person they can't manipulate, themselves. They wanted you to stoop down, to play dirty, to go back and forth. Why? Because that would have proven you were still within their reach. That would have meant they still had access to your energy. But you walked out. You didn't slam the door. You just closed it so quietly, they didn't even realize you were gone until the silence started screaming. That's the thing about being chosen. You're not here to destroy others. You're here to outgrow them. You don't need to throw punches when your presence alone forces people to check themselves. Your evolution exposed what they refused to fix. And now, without your energy to cover their cracks, all that's left is the mess they refuse to clean up. Let's be honest, they never expected maturity to hit this hard. They thought you'd play the same emotional games, but instead, you chose healing over havoc. You went inward while they stayed stuck outward. And in that process, you didn't just level up, you became untouchable. And if part of you is still wondering, did I do the right thing by walking away quietly? Yes, 1,000 times yes, because sometimes the deepest cuts don't bleed, they just expose. And that's what you did. You revealed everything without lifting a single weapon. You forced them to see who they really are by simply refusing to be who they thought you were. Your silence was not absence. It was presence, focused, powerful, and undeniable. It was the loudest form of truth they've ever heard. And now they're haunted by it. They replay it. They question it. They resent it. Because it means they lost control. Not because you overpowered them, but because you didn't even need to engage. That's what emotional and spiritual precision looks like. That's what soul surgery is. You see the wound, you don't scream at it, you don't argue with it. You remove yourself from the infection and let it rot in its own space. That's healing. That's power. And that's why they're still spiraling while you're still rising. So let them talk. Let them twist the narrative. Let them cast themselves as victims of your distance or coldness. You know the truth. You gave them a gift. You gave them a chance to rise with you. But they chose ego. So you gave them something else, the weight of their own choices. And now, that weight is heavier than any clapback you could have thrown. Stand tall, chosen one, because while they were swinging wildly in the dark, you were slicing with light, and nothing cuts deeper than truth delivered in silence. Number 4, you gave them freedom, and that terrified their control. They weren't afraid of losing you. They were afraid of losing the only love that didn't ask them to wear a mask. Let's get one thing straight. They weren't just hurt that you walked away. They were shattered by what walked away with you, because it wasn't just you they lost. It was the rarest kind of love most people never experience in a lifetime. Love without chains. Love that didn't demand performance. Love that didn't smother. Love that didn't play games or come with fine print. You didn't love them to keep them. You loved them to free them. And that chosen one is exactly why they couldn't handle it. They were used to transactional affection, love that came with strings, threats, power plays. They were taught that love is control disguised as care, that someone staying means they've been conquered. That attention has to be earned, begged for, or manipulated out of people. And then you showed up, pure, calm, open. You didn't try to own them, you just saw them. And for the first time in their life, someone looked at them without asking for a performance in return. At first, it felt like heaven. Then it felt like hell. Because with you, there were no walls to hide behind. You saw straight through the version of themselves they tried to sell to the world. You touched the part of them they buried so deep, they forgot it was even there. And when you didn't try to fix, change, or control them, they panicked. Why? Because love without conditions leaves no room for manipulation. It doesn't give the ego anywhere to hide. They couldn't bait you into jealousy. They couldn't hook you with guilt. You didn't bite when they tested your limits. You didn't chase when they pulled away. And that scared them more than anything, because someone who doesn't need you but still chooses you, that's a threat to someone addicted to control. You weren't just offering love, you were offering freedom. You gave them space to be, to breathe, to fall apart and not be judged, to rise without owing you credit. And in that space, they faced something terrifying. The truth. The truth that love isn't ownership. That someone could love them and still walk away. That someone could see their worst and still not play dirty. They didn't know how to receive that, because it meant the end of the games, the end of the back and forth, the end of the manipulative tactics that worked on everyone else. You weren't playing, you were loving. And it hit different. It hit so different that when you left, when you finally closed the door, not only did you take your presence with you, you took away the safest emotional space they ever had. And now they're starving, starving for that kind of peace, that kind of affection that didn't feel like a leash, that kind of connection that felt like breathing room instead of a prison sentence. But you're gone, and you didn't leave with rage. You didn't storm out. You simply stopped watering a garden where weeds were being mistaken for flowers. You stepped back because love should elevate, not exhaust. And your love. It was whole, it was rare, it didn't just show up, it held space. And when it was clear they were using that space to play, not to grow, you reclaimed it. Now they're replaying every moment, every act of grace you gave without needing applause, every time you listened without using it against them, every day you loved them in their rawness and still stood firm in your own. And it haunts them, because they thought love was something to conquer. But with you, they learned that true love cannot be owned, only honored. Chosen one, understand this. Your love didn't scare them because it was weak. It scared them because it was too strong to control, too honest to manipulate, too pure to poison. And that kind of love, it's unforgettable. That kind of love rewires people. It cracks open the false selves they hide behind. It leaves fingerprints on their soul they can't scrub off. So don't you dare doubt what you gave. Don't you dare think you were too much, too soft, too open. You weren't too anything. You were real. And in a world full of people screaming for attention but starving for authenticity, you were the rare one who didn't just give love. You were love. You are not the one who lost. You are the one who loved without expecting chains. and that made you the freest and most dangerous thing they'd ever met. Now, they're stuck chasing echoes of what you gave so freely, trying to find that same love in people who only know how to imitate it. But they'll never find it, not like that, because what you gave can't be faked. It can't be copied. It can only be felt, and that's why they can't forget you. You were the calm in their storm, the breath in their suffocation, the mirror in their masquerade. And now that you're gone, they realize, maybe too late, that they were never really in control. They were just blessed for a moment to be held by something real. Number 5. You shook their world without moving a muscle. Stillness isn't the absence of power. It's the proof that you are the power they tried to provoke. They wanted a show. They wanted a reaction so they could say, "See, I still have control." But you didn't flinch. You didn't chase, cry, explain, or explode. You stood still, rooted, centered, and in that silence, in that refusal to budge, you said everything they never wanted to hear. They came to test you, to twist you, to get under your skin, and when all they got was your calm, they panicked, because stillness to a chaotic mind isn't just confusing, it's threatening. Your calm was not compliance, it was confrontation, the kind that doesn't come with raised voices, but with raised standards. They expected to meet the old version of you, the one who would spiral into over-explaining, the one who would match their energy just to keep the peace, the one who would shrink to avoid conflict. But that version? Gone. You leveled up, and with that evolution came stillness. The kind of stillness that speaks louder than any argument, any insult, any attempt to bait you back into the madness. Your stillness was a declaration. I know who I am now. And that kind of self-knowledge, it's bulletproof. You didn't stand still because you were paralyzed. You stood still because you were powerful. Because moving would have meant stepping off the throne of your self-respect just to entertain their circus. And chosen one, you were never meant to dance for clowns. Stillness is a weapon they never see coming. It reflects everything back at them. In your silence, they had to sit with their noise. In your calm, they had to face their chaos. In your refusal to engage, they were exposed. They couldn't twist your words because you gave them none. They couldn't flip the narrative because you exited the story. You stopped being their character. You stopped feeding the drama. And without you, their power crumbled. Understand this. People addicted to control can't handle someone they can't move. They're used to pushing buttons and getting sparks. But when they pushed yours and nothing happened, no tears, no texts, no triggered response, they felt powerless. And for someone who builds their entire identity on controlling others, that's the deepest cut. You stood there like a mountain while they threw emotional tantrums. You didn't move. You didn't break. You didn't even blink. That shook them. Because what do you do when your manipulation doesn't work? When your victim doesn't act like one? When the person you tried to shatter simply refused to fall? You became the calm in the storm they created, the eye of the hurricane they thought would destroy you. And as they spun out, searching for some kind of reaction, all they got was your back. Your stillness wasn't silence. It was strategy. It was strength wrapped in grace. And that haunts them more than any insult or comeback ever could. They weren't ready for someone who had already done the inner work. Someone who had nothing to prove, no desire to explain, and no interest in revenge. They were playing emotional checkers while you were playing spiritual chess. Every move they made exposed them, not you. And every non-move you made reminded them that they never had you like they thought they did. Stillness is power, chosen one, and you mastered it. Because stillness doesn't mean indifference, it means discipline. It means choosing not to waste your energy on people who aren't worth the breath. It means knowing that not every insult needs a reply, not every attack deserves a defense, and not every invitation to chaos should be accepted. That kind of restraint, that's high-level strength. And they felt it. They spun stories in their head about how you'd respond. They had entire scripts written. But when you didn't show up to play the role they assigned you, their whole theater fell apart. They were left standing on a stage, performing for a crowd that no longer existed, because you took your presence with you, and your absence said more than any monologue could. You didn't need revenge. You didn't need to clap back. Your silence did the talking. Your peace screamed. Your boundaries echoed. And now they're stuck with the one thing they never wanted, themselves. So if you've been wondering whether your stillness was the right move, it was. It always is. Because when you hold your ground, when you stay rooted in self-respect, the storm has no power over you. It can swirl, it can rage, it can try to tear you down. But if you refuse to move, it breaks itself trying. You didn't walk away because you were weak. You stayed still because you were done proving your worth to people who couldn't see it. You held the line, and that line became a wall, a boundary, a statement. And now, long after the noise has died down, you're still standing, and them still spinning. Number 6. You read them like a book they didn't know was open. When you understand someone deeper than they understand themselves, you don't just shake their world, you shatter their mask. Chosen one, this is where it gets real. You weren't just another person passing through their life. You were a mirror, a decoder, a light that shined straight through their carefully built facade. You didn't just observe their behavior, you saw beneath it. You didn't just hear their words, you listened to the pain behind them, and that shook them to the core. Because most people are used to being misunderstood. They're used to hiding behind charm, rage, manipulation, or silence. But you looked beyond all of it. You saw the fear behind the anger. You saw the wounds behind the arrogance. You didn't get triggered. You got clarity. You didn't react. You read. And that kind of sight, that kind of inner vision, it's terrifying to someone who doesn't even understand their own damage. You weren't just forgiving them, you were understanding them, not to excuse them, but to unchain yourself, to see the full picture without needing to be part of it anymore. And in doing that, you robbed them of the one thing they clung to most, the ability to control how they're seen. They're used to wearing masks. They're used to people only scratching the surface, but you went straight to the root. And once you did, they knew they couldn't hide anymore. Not from you, not from themselves. That's why they panicked. That's why they pulled away. That's why they lashed out. You didn't just get them, you exposed them. You didn't call them out, you saw them out. And trust me, that hurts far more. Most people are afraid of being hurt, but people like them, they're more afraid of being seen. Because once someone sees their pain, their patterns, their sabotage, they lose the ability to pretend. And once you gave them that moment of full exposure, they couldn't go back to the fantasy. They couldn't return to the version of themselves they curated for the world. You held a mirror to their soul, and they saw the mess. You didn't yell. You didn't humiliate. You didn't seek revenge. You just stood there in truth, calm, still, aware, and it was deafening. That's the thing, chosen one. People will fear what they can't fool, and you were unfoolable. You didn't just know what they were doing, you knew why. And when someone realizes you understand the very parts of themselves they run from, they don't know whether to cling to you or run from you. Most do both. That's why they pulled back. That's why they ghosted. That's why they went cold. Because your understanding felt like exposure, and they weren't ready to heal. They were ready to control. But you weren't there to play therapist. You were there to grow. And while they were busy pretending, you were busy perceiving. While they were manipulating the surface, you were decoding the roots. And that's what makes you different. That's why they'll never forget you. Because no one has ever looked at them like you did. No one has ever seen them like you did. And now, they can't unsee what you showed them. You weren't offering revenge, you were offering revelation. And revelation is raw. It's uncomfortable. It's unrelenting. You didn't expose their secrets. You made them confront them. Quietly, elegantly, brutally. You gave them the gift of truth, and they treated it like poison. Not because it was wrong, but because it was too real. Chosen one, understand this. It wasn't your presence that scared them. It was your perception. It wasn't your love that overwhelmed them. It was your awareness. You saw them in ways no one else ever did, and probably never will again. And now, they're left with the imprint of that awareness. They'll chase people who flatter, people who please, people who pretend, but none of them will see like you did. None of them will understand the chaos behind the calm. None of them will recognize the scared child behind the hardened adult. And the sad truth, most people don't want healing. They want control. They want validation for the version of themselves they created, not the transformation they actually need. But you didn't validate the mask. You made them question it. And that's why they ran. That's why they blamed. That's why they spiraled. But know this, you did nothing wrong. You weren't too deep, too intense, or too much. You were real. You were rare. You were awake. And you offered them a level of love and awareness they didn't even know how to hold. That's not a flaw. That's your power. So stand in that power. You don't need to be understood by those who fear understanding. You don't need to explain your clarity to people addicted to confusion. You saw what you saw. You felt what you felt. And your silence, your stillness, your refusal to be manipulated, that was your reply. Let them pretend they're unbothered. Let them claim they've moved on. The truth is, they're haunted. Haunted by the one person who didn't fall for the performance. Haunted by the only one who understood the story behind the scars. You are the memory they'll never escape. The reflection they'll never be able to shatter. The soul that read theirs and walked away with peace. Number 7, you were the realest thing in a world built on illusion. They weren't addicted to you. They were addicted to the truth that you carried, and now they're starving for it in rooms full of mirrors. Let's get this clear right now. You weren't the one putting on a show. You were the one turning the lights on. While they mastered performance, you embodied presence. While they played characters for approval, you stood firm in your truth. And that's exactly why they couldn't handle you, because you didn't give them what they were used to. You gave them what they'd been craving their entire life, even if they didn't know it. They were used to masks, to people who said what needed to be said to get what they wanted, to shallow affection that looked like love but felt like emptiness. They were addicted to the attention, the validation, the high of being seen without ever being known. And then you showed up, real, raw, rooted, no gimmicks, no games, just you. And your presence? It hit like truth in a world that had only ever known lies. You didn't act interested, you were interested. You didn't say things to get a reaction, you said things that meant something. You didn't flatter their ego, you spoke to their soul. You didn't chase, you didn't perform, you didn't bend or twist to make them comfortable. You just stood there in your truth. And that truth made their whole illusion shake. Because presence like yours is rare. It's disruptive. It cuts through the noise and reveals what people are trying to hide. And for someone built on surface-level interactions, being truly seen is terrifying. They weren't ready for someone who didn't just observe them, but felt them. They weren't prepared for someone who didn't need to impress, but simply was. You weren't there to be liked. You were there to be real. And in the end, that reality became the most unforgettable part of you. They didn't know how to place you because they couldn't label you, couldn't predict you, couldn't use the usual playbook to control or impress you. You were unbothered by attention and unmoved by tactics. You weren't trying to win them over, you were just being you. And for people used to navigating a world of transactional love, that kind of authenticity is overwhelming. You want to know why they're still haunted by you, why they still stalk your energy from a distance, even while pretending they've moved on. It's because they can't recreate what you gave. They can't mimic it. They can't replace it. They go from person to person, from surface to surface, gathering moments that look good on paper, but feel hollow in their chest. And deep down, they know it. They know the only time they ever felt grounded, felt seen, felt whole, was when you were standing in front of them, not performing. You didn't need applause. You weren't auditioning. You were the truth. The one experience they didn't have to question, decode, or doubt. The only energy that didn't shift with the wind or bend to the mood of the room. And now, they're surrounded by masks. People clapping on cue, laughing on schedule, nodding on autopilot. And none of it fills the space you left. Because when someone meets presence after a lifetime of performance, it changes them, even if they run from it, even if they sabotage it, even if they lie to themselves and say it wasn't that deep. It was, and they know it every time they lay next to someone who doesn't know their soul, every time they get praised for the mask they wear, every time they're surrounded by people who like them but don't get them. That void, that ache, that echo, that's you. And what's worse for them is knowing it was their fault. You didn't leave because you lacked something. You left because they refused to match your depth. They wanted entertainment, not elevation. They wanted ego boosts, not soul growth. And when you didn't give them the usual script to follow, they fumbled the one thing they didn't realize was once in a lifetime realness. Chosen one, hear this. You are not forgettable. You are not replaceable. And you are not just someone from their past. You are the one who disrupted their entire system. You are the one who showed up without the mask and forced them to question their own. You are the one who gave them truth, not tricks. And that kind of truth, it doesn't fade, it lingers, it rewrites people, and it ruins the taste for the fake. So don't you dare shrink. Don't second-guess the way you showed up. Your authenticity was never the problem. It was their mirror. You were the reflection they weren't ready to face, the stillness they couldn't control, the depth they weren't ready to swim in. And now, they're stuck in the shallow end, replaying the one moment they truly felt something real. They don't miss you. They miss what you represented. And now that you're gone, they know they can't fake that feeling again. You were the rarest thing in their world, the one person who didn't perform. And that, chosen one, is the addiction they'll never escape. Number 8. You weren't their escape. You were the awakening they never asked for. You didn't make them feel better. You made them feel real. And that's the kind of impact no fake love can compete with. Chosen one, understand this. You weren't the drug. You were the detox. You didn't give them a high. You gave them clarity. And clarity is the last thing someone wants when they're trying to run from themselves. While others gave them comfort in the illusion, you gave them the uncomfortable truth. You didn't pacify their wounds. You held up a mirror and made them look. Your presence didn't make them feel numb. It made them feel seen. It didn't stroke their ego. It exposed it. You weren't a fantasy. You were the reality check. And for someone used to getting drunk on attention, validation, and fake intimacy, your energy was sobering, brutal, beautiful, unavoidable. That's why they're still haunted. Because with you, they didn't escape their demons. They met them. You didn't offer a soft place to hide. You offered light. And light doesn't lie. It exposes everything. You didn't scream at them, shame them, or save them. You just stood there, real, steady, unshaken, and that alone cracked their illusions wide open. You woke something up in them that now won't go back to sleep. You showed them a version of love, of truth, of presence that they didn't know they needed until it was gone. It wasn't lust. It wasn't infatuation. It was spiritual sobriety. A moment of stillness in the middle of all their chaos. A glimpse of what alignment feels like. And now, they're chasing highs again, scrolling through people, moments, empty conversations. But nothing sticks. Because once someone experiences truth, the fake never satisfies again. Once they've been seen the way you saw them, they can't go back to being flattered by surface-level masks. They didn't lose a partner. They lost their mirror of potential, their wake-up call. And now they're wide awake in a world of illusions, desperate to feel that presence again. But it's too late. You weren't their addiction. You were their clarity. And clarity doesn't come back when they're ready. It only comes once, and you were it. Number 9. You left without a scene. Now they're trapped in a story with no ending. You didn't just walk away. You left them with the truth, the silence, and themselves. That's not a goodbye. That's a sentence. Chosen one, they thought you'd be back. They thought you'd circle the block, throw one last text, show up with closure, or give them a final round of drama. But you didn't. You vanished like peace after the storm. No explosion, no breakdown, just gone. And that is what destroyed them. Because people like that count on your reaction. They build their identity around it. They thought your love was a leash. They thought you leaving was a phase. But you weren't bluffing. You were done, not to teach them a lesson, but because the version of you they thought they could manipulate no longer exists. You didn't outsmart them. You outgrew them, quietly, without a single ounce of bitterness. And that grace, that calm exit, that's what haunts them. You didn't let them rewrite the story. You didn't give them a dramatic finale. You didn't hand them closure they could weaponize. You just closed the book and let them sit in the silence. Now they're stuck with it, themselves, their mistakes, their sabotage, their ego, their ghosts. You were the last real thing in their life, and they know it. Every connection since you has been noise, cheap copies and shallow hits. No one else feels like you. No one else sees them like you did. And no one else walks away with that much dignity. Because you didn't just leave the room. You took the air with you. You weren't the storm, they were. And when you stopped dancing in their chaos, the winds died down. Now they're sitting in stillness that screams, because now they understand. Losing you wasn't temporary. It was permanent. A moment they'll revisit forever. A door that won't reopen. A sentence they can't appeal. And the worst part? You didn't slam that door. They did. You just made sure it stayed shut. Your exit wasn't revenge. It was revelation. And now, every day, they live inside the story they tried to control. And without you, that story has no ending, only echoes.